His fingers traced the rim of my glass, barely touching, but I felt every whisper of contact. The sunset painted us in amber light, and when he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear, I knew this evening would change everything. "You look beautiful tonight, Nora," he murmured, his voice carrying something I'd never heard before, something that made my pulse quicken despite myself. Before we dive in, take a second to hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying this. Your support means everything, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's continue. I shouldn't have been sitting here with Frank. Steve was in the city for another week-long business trip, and I'd driven up to the family cabin to escape the loneliness. Frank had arrived unexpectedly, claiming he needed a break from his hectic life. My step-uncle had always been charming, but tonight felt different. The way his eyes lingered on me, the careful distance he maintained, it was like he was fighting. Something, too. "Remember when we used to sit out here during family gatherings?" he asked, settling deeper into the cushioned porch swing. "You'd always find the quietest corner, away from all the chaos." I smiled, remembering. "You'd bring me lemonade and sit with me until I felt brave enough to join the others." The memory stirred something warm in my chest. Frank had always been my refuge during those overwhelming family events. "You were so shy back then," he said, his gaze softening. "Hard to believe you're the same woman who runs her own design firm, now." Heat crept up my neck. Steve rarely talked about my work with such genuine interest. "Things change," I said quietly. "They do." His voice dropped lower, more intimate. "Some changes are unexpected." The air between us shifted, charged with an electricity I couldn't ignore. When he reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch lingered longer than it should have. My breath caught, and I saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Want, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "Frank," I started, but the words died when his thumb traced along my cheekbone. "I know," he whispered. "I know this is complicated. I know you're married. I know I shouldn't be thinking about you the way I have been." His hand dropped to his lap, but the warmth of his touch remained on my skin. "How long?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He was quiet for a moment, studying the horizon where the sun was painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Since Christmas. When you laughed at my terrible joke about the turkey, and Steve was too busy on his phone to notice." His jaw tightened. "He doesn't see you, Nora. Not really." My heart hammered against my ribs. Steve had been distant lately, consumed with work, treating our conversations like items on his to-do list. But Frank listened when I spoke, asked follow-up questions, remembered details about my day. "We can't," I said, though the words felt hollow. "I know." He turned to face me fully, and I could see the conflict warring in his expression. "But that doesn't change how I feel, how you make me feel." The admission hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn. The rational part of my mind screamed warnings. He was family, I was married, this was wrong in every way that mattered. But the part of me that had been starving for genuine connection, for someone to see me as more than just a wife fulfilling duties, that part whispered dangerous possibilities. As if sensing my internal battle, Frank stood and moved to the porch railing, putting distance between us. "I should go," he said, his voice strained. "Before I do something we'll both regret." "Stay." The word escaped before I could catch it. He froze, his knuckles white where they gripped the railing. "Nora, please." I rose from the swing, my legs unsteady. "I don't want to be alone tonight." He turned slowly, and the look in his eyes made my stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do." I stepped closer, close enough to catch the scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "I'm asking you to stay. I'm asking you to see me." His resistance crumbled visibly. One moment we were standing apart, the next his hands were cupping my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks as he searched my eyes. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, I rose on my tiptoes and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was soft, at first tentative, giving us both a chance to pull back. But when he responded, his mouth moving against mine with gentle urgency, everything else fell away. His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me against him as the kiss deepened. I could taste the wine we'd shared, could feel the rapid beat of his heart against my chest, my hands fisted in his shirt, anchoring myself to this moment, to this feeling of being truly wanted. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "God, Nora, you have no idea how long I've wanted to do that." "Show me," I whispered, surprising myself with my boldness. His eyes darkened with desire, but also with something deeper, affection, tenderness, the promise of being cherished. He took my hand, intertwining our fingers, and led me inside. The cabin felt different now, charged with possibility. Frank turned to face me in the living room, his hands finding my waist, his touch reverent. "We can stop," he said softly. "If you want to stop, just say the word." But stopping was the last thing I wanted. I reached up, my fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight roughness of evening stubble. "I don't want to stop." He kissed me again, deeper this time, his hands sliding up my back, learning the curve of my spine. I melted into him, every nerve ending alive with sensation. When his lips moved to my neck, pressing gentle kisses along the sensitive skin, I let out a soft sigh that seemed to encourage him. His hands were patient, exploring with the kind of attention that made me feel precious. He traced the outline of my shoulders, his fingers skimming the edge of my summer dress, asking permission with every touch. I nodded, my breath catching as he slowly worked the zipper down my back. The dress pooled at my feet, and I should have felt exposed, vulnerable. Instead, I felt beautiful under his gaze, desired in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. His eyes roamed over me with an appreciation that made heat bloom in my chest. "You're stunning," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. I reached for his shirt, my fingers working the buttons with trembling hands. He helped me, shrugging out of it to reveal the chest I'd tried not to notice during family pool parties, the strong shoulders that had always made me feel safe. We moved together toward the bedroom, pausing every few steps to kiss, to touch, to marvel at this new territory we were entering. The bed was made with crisp white sheets that looked silver in the moonlight streaming through the windows. Frank's hands were gentle as he laid me down, his weight settling beside me with careful consideration. Every kiss, every caress was a question I answered with sighs and whispered encouragement. He took his time, learning what made me gasp, what made me arch beneath him. When his mouth found the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, I couldn't help the small sound of pleasure that escaped. He smiled against my skin, his breath warm as he continued his exploration. His hands mapped my body like he was memorizing every curve, every response. "Tell me what you want," he whispered against my ear, his voice sending shivers down my spine. "You," I breathed, "just you." He shifted above me, his eyes meeting mine in the dim light. "Are you certain?" "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of my decision. He moved with such tenderness, such care, that tears pricked at my eyes. This wasn't just physical, it was connection, understanding, the feeling of being truly seen and valued. Every movement was deliberate, focused on my comfort, my pleasure. Our bodies found a rhythm together, a gentle dance that built slowly, sweetly. His forehead pressed against mine, our breaths mingling as we moved in perfect synchronization. The pleasure built gradually, like a warm tide rising within me. "Look at me," he said softly, and when our eyes met, I felt something shift inside me, a recognition, a sense of rightness that scared and thrilled me simultaneously. The sensation crested gently, washing over me in waves that left me trembling, in his arms. He held me through it, his own release following shortly after, his body shuddering against mine as he buried his face in my neck. Afterward, we lay entwined, my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His fingers combed through my hair, the touch soothing and intimate. "I should feel guilty," I said quietly. "But you don't?" His voice was carefully neutral. "No." I lifted my head to look at him. "Should I?" He was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I don't know. This wasn't supposed to happen, but I can't bring myself to regret it." I settled back against his chest, feeling a peace I hadn't experienced in months. For once, I wasn't thinking about Steve's expectations, about the perfect wife role I'd been playing. I was just myself, wanted and appreciated for who I truly was. We made love again later, slower this time, with less urgency but more depth. Frank worshipped my body with his hands and mouth, showing me a kind of attention I'd forgotten existed. I reciprocated, exploring him with newfound confidence, delighting in the sounds of pleasure I could draw from him. As dawn crept through the windows, painting the room in soft pastels, I knew I would have to face reality soon. But for now, wrapped in Frank's arms, I allowed myself to feel cherished. "What happens now?" I asked as the morning light grew stronger. Frank's arms tightened around me. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I don't want this to be just one night." The admission sent a thrill through me, even as it complicated everything. "Frank, I know it's impossible," he said quickly. "I know you have a life, a marriage. I'm not asking you to leave Steve or make any dramatic changes. I need you to know that this meant something to me." "You mean something to me?" I turned in his arms, studying his face in the morning light. There was sincerity there, along with the careful vulnerability of a man who'd just admitted to wanting something he couldn't have. "You mean something to me too," I whispered. We made love one more time as the sun climbed higher, a bittersweet joining that felt like both a beginning and an ending. When we finally separated, the spell was broken. Reality crept back in. Steve would be calling soon for his daily check-in. I had responsibilities waiting back home. I dressed slowly, hyper-aware of Frank watching me, of the way his eyes lingered on each newly covered inch of skin. When I was fully clothed again, the magic of the night felt more distant, but not forgotten. "When will I see you again?" he asked, pulling on his own clothes. "I don't know." The honesty hurt, but it was all I could offer. He nodded, understanding but disappointed. "If you need anything, if you need to talk, or if you just need someone to listen, call me. I will." But we both knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. I drove home in a daze, my body still humming with the memory of his touch. Steve called as I was pulling into our driveway, his voice cheerful but distracted as he told me about his meetings, his deals, his important business. "Miss me?" he asked, the question feeling automatic rather than genuine. "Yes," I lied, or maybe it wasn't entirely a lie. I missed the stability he represented, the life we'd built together. But I didn't miss him the way I was already missing Frank. The days that followed were torture. I went through the motions of my normal routine, but everything felt different. Colors seemed more vivid, my skin more sensitive, my body alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I caught myself touching my lips, remembering Frank's kisses, or running my fingers along my collarbone where he'd traced patterns with his tongue. Steve returned home on Friday, full of stories about his successful trip. He kissed me perfunctorily, his mind already shifting to weekend plans that involved golf and business dinners. He didn't notice the way I tensed when he touched me, didn't see the guilt that must have been written across my face. That night, as he reached for me in bed with the same predictable routine he'd followed for years, I closed my eyes and tried to respond. But my body remembered Frank's patience, his focus on my pleasure, the way he'd made me feel like the center of his universe. "You seem distracted," Steve said afterward, already turning away to check his phone. "Just tired," I replied, staring at the ceiling and wondering how I was going to survive this double life. Frank texted me the next day, just a simple "thinking of you" that made my heart race. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding with an equally innocuous "you too." It was hardly scandalous, but it felt like betrayal. The guilt ate at me during the week, warring with the deep satisfaction I felt whenever I remembered that night. I threw myself into work, trying to distract my mind, but even there I found myself spacing out, reliving moments of tenderness I'd never experienced with my husband. Steve noticed my distraction, but attributed it to work stress. He suggested I take a weekend at the spa, his solution to most of my emotional needs. The suggestion irritated me more than it should have, another reminder that he saw me as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I think I'll go back to the cabin. The quiet might help." His face brightened with relief. "Great idea. You love it up there." I did love it there, but more than that, I loved the version of myself I'd discovered in Frank's arms. I called Frank from the road, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. "Nora?" His voice was warm, hopeful. "I'm driving to the cabin," I said without preamble. "Will you meet me there?" There was a pause and I held my breath, suddenly terrified he'd refuse. "I'll be there in 2 hours," he said finally. This time there was no pretense of coincidence. When I pulled up to the cabin, Frank was already waiting on the porch, and the hunger in his eyes when he saw me nearly made my knees buckle. We didn't make it inside before he was kissing me, pressing me against the car door with a desperation that matched my own. His hands were everywhere, reacquainting themselves with my body, and I responded with equal fervor. "I've been going crazy," he murmured against my neck. "Thinking about you, wanting you." "Show me," I gasped, echoing the words from our first night together. This time, our lovemaking had an edge of desperation, of stolen time and forbidden pleasure. We moved together with an urgency born of separation, of the knowledge that these moments were precious and limited. Later, as we lay tangled in the sheets, Frank traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. "I can't keep doing this," I said quietly, his hand stilled. "What do you mean?" "This sneaking around, lying to Steve, it's killing me. So what are you saying?" His voice was carefully controlled. I turned to face him, studying his beloved features in the lamplight. "I'm saying I need to make a choice." Fear flickered in his eyes. "And what choice is that?" I took a deep breath, knowing that my next words would change everything. "I'm saying I choose you." The relief that flooded his face was answer enough. He pulled me close, holding me tight against his chest. "Are you sure?" he whispered, Because once you leave him, there's no going back. I'm sure. And I was. Whatever came next, the difficult conversations, the family drama, the complete upheaval of my life, I was ready for it, ready to stop pretending, ready to stop settling for a marriage that left me feeling invisible. I love you, Frank said, the words carrying the weight of everything we'd been afraid to say. I love you too. The admission felt like coming home. We spent the rest of the weekend planning, talking about practical matters and dreams alike. Frank would help me find a lawyer, would support me through the divorce process. We both knew it wouldn't be easy. Steve would be blindsided, the family would be scandalized, there would be judgment and complications we couldn't even imagine yet. But as I looked at this man who saw me, truly saw me, who made me feel alive and valued and desired, I knew I was making the right choice. Some connections were worth fighting, worth the chaos they brought. When Monday came, I drove home to Steve with a plan and a newfound sense of purpose. The conversation would be difficult, but necessary. I couldn't keep living a lie, couldn't keep pretending to be happy in a marriage that felt more like an arrangement than a partnership. Frank had awakened something in me, not just passion, but the realization that I deserved more than settling. I deserved to be seen, to be cherished, to be someone's priority rather than their afterthought. As I pulled into my driveway, I took a deep breath and prepared to reclaim my life. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between safety and passion, between what was expected and what felt right? What would you do if you found yourself drawn to someone who made you feel truly alive for the first time in years? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our stories. Trust me, things are about to get even more intense.